This video is brought to you by morethanArealestateagent.com, your #1 source for real estate merch on the internet. Use code YouTube for 10% off your first store. What's going on, good people? It's your brother, your uncle, your favorite realtor's favorite realtor. And for today's video, I am all about helping agents like yourself get these clients to the finish line in one piece. So depending on what state you're in, you may either be working with a closing attorney or a title company in order to cross that finish line with our clients. So for today's video, my guest is Miss Kiersten Matthews, who is a high-powered attorney here in the state of Georgia with the Hawes Law Firm. You may be familiar with this law firm because they were featured on the show Ladies Who List Atlanta. Miss Matthews was so gracious to spend some of her time educating agents like yourself on some of the pitfalls to avoid that cause hiccups on the day of closing and how we as real estate professionals can get ahead of that. If you're a brand new agent, you definitely are going to want to tune into this because before long, you are going to have that client that you're working with, and you want to be armed with all of the knowledge possible so that you can lead these clients to a successful closing. And as always, if you are not currently with Real Brokerage and you don't get value like this from your particular brokerage, I would love to have a conversation on why so many agents are partnering with me here at Real Brokerage and getting free 99 game like this on a regular basis. Please click the link in the first pinned comment to have a conversation with me on what alignment here at Real Brokerage looks like. So without further ado, let's tune into today's mastermind call. Enjoy. Marvin Oria. I'm representing my HBCUs today. I'm repping for the PV fam. I'm a TSU baby, but I got to represent for the HBCUs right there. And I got the Black Panther Wakanda Forever hat going on. But I'm excited for our Friday call today, y'all. Y'all are in for a treat. We have my preferred closing attorney firm, the Hawes Law Firm, Miss Kiersten Matthews, with us today. As she's going through, and we were just doing a little bit of pregame talking right now, so you didn't miss anything, y'all, if y'all just popped in now. She's going to tell you guys in great detail why their law firm is the preferred law firm for many high-powered agents here in the Atlanta area. Also, how to best prepare for closing day if you're a brand new agent. She's going to walk through all of that. Some of the nightmares that your office has dealt with that us as real estate professionals can learn from. And then lastly, a lot of the services that you all offer from an ancillary standpoint, such as the ability to use an office, to do buyer seminars. She talked through that a little bit before we started.
Thank you so much. So to those who don't know me, I'm Kiersten Matthews. I'm with the Hawes Law Firm. I am one of the preferred closing attorneys. And here is we want to talk about a couple of things. The first one, why the Hawes Law Firm? So here in Atlanta, there are many closing attorneys that you can choose from, but where the Hawes Law Firm stands out is the knowledge that we possess, the flexibility that we possess, and the relationships that we create and cultivate. Our biggest thing is we believe that everyone's goal is the same, and that is that you want to get to the closing table and actually close. We want to make this a success. We didn't drive clients around, meet up with them to view houses, never to make it to the closing table. And so that's our job, to make sure we make it to the closing table. And that does in a couple of ways. So obviously, once the contract comes over, the biggest hurdle that people run into is possibly title, right? There are times where we were told by our clients, or we were hoping that the title would be clear, and it's not. One thing that the Hawes Law Firm has done is that we're not backed by just one, but several title companies, which means that if one title company is unsure about taking the risk, we have others that'll back up to make sure that we can still get the deal done. Also, we have cultivated relationships with several of the city entities, federal entities, IRS, you name it, where we can go and try to get these responses quickly so that way your closings aren't delayed. Now, will it be perfect all the time? I wish. But having those relationships has saved us numerous of days of delays. Another thing is, again, the knowledgeability. When we go through this, we're talking to you the whole time. There's no confusion. You're having no guessing games. You don't have to think, has this been turned in? Do I have this? Someone is always in communication with you to tell you, hey, I don't have your commission agreement. I'm missing the home warranty. Hey, we had an issue with the title. Here's what it is. Give us these 3 days. We'll either have it solved or we'll come back to you and we'll need some assistance. Like, there'll be no guessing games. It is clear, concise, so that you know where you stand. And if you have any questions, they give you the direct point of contact as to who ask it. But then also the relationship. So our relationship extends beyond our transactions. So it is not simply, hey, you send the law firm a contract and we thank you, do the closing, and send you on our way. We want to make sure that you understand that you are loved, right?
Right.
Because the real estate game, it can be tough sometimes. This right here, we're slowly getting out of the what I call the termination season, where a lot of people had gotten really good at getting terminations because people were going under contract and the smallest thing was making them terminate contract. It didn't appraise, no one wanted it, go away. Too many repairs, the seller didn't want to fix it, terminate. And so there were a lot of agents who were concerned because with a high interest rate, high termination, and low inventory, it creates a very volatile market, right? And so you're looking for ways to boost yourself, and we help in that. So we do that whether you want us to attend homebuyer seminars, sponsor events. Recently, there was an agent who did a like creative party, and she was like helping people do marketing and such. We sponsor events like those. Our goal is to make sure you understand that this is a full law firm. We're here to support you and your clients. We do client events, client appreciation events. We sponsor those, and then we do our own as well. We've had times where we've done movie theater events and um, parties and mixers. The idea is this should be a full circle. Like it's no different than if you were working a 9 to 5 job, right? You would have the work wife or the work husband and the coworkers that you're cool with that you may hang out. This should be no different. It shouldn't then be transactional where you see us once in a while and you never see us again. You should be able to feel like I can call them for anything. And there's quite a few, several agents who have my personal number who will send me a text like, hey, you got 5 minutes? I got a quick question. I'm here for it. Because again, this is not, it's not transactional. This should be a relationship. Like we should feel like I can lean on you. I can ask you a question or ask your advice for something and I feel supported, right? And that's one thing that the Hawes Law Firm can present. Also, the fact that our attorneys are multi-faced, if you will. So not only do all of them do real estate, but then there are some who can help you in, for example, your business ventures. So we have 2 attorneys who does business formations, foreclosures, structures, the whole nine. Like they will help set up, do contract reviews, whatever. So they're trust. We have a lot of times we run into a lot of probate issues when we're doing real estate because sometimes the property that you get or your client receives is not something they bought. Maybe it's something they inherit. And now they need help navigating that probate. We have an amazing probate attorney who is a real estate attorney, but she has done probate for so many years. She's able to navigate you through that probate so that you don't delay. I personally used to do divorce. So I've helped people who have family issues, try to make sure they understand when to file, when not to file to make sure that they can sell these procurements. So we have attorneys who do more than just one function. So that way you don't feel like you're corner and just, okay, well, you only do real estate and I need assistance with that. We have somewhat, listen, we do that too. It's almost like UBS, right? We do that too. So that is a snapshot. Now, are there any questions? Because if not, I want to talk about some pitfalls.
I have a question.
Go right here.
I was just dealing with this in specific here in Georgia, y'all. You have the flexibility as representing the buyer's agent to utilize your attorney, which of course I strongly suggest the Hawes Law Firm. But in some cases, right, if a deal wants to get done, the listing agent may say they prefer to use their attorney. Ms. Kiki, talk about some of the issues, and it may lead into your pitfall conversation, but what are some of the risks with using an attorney that you're not familiar with?
So one of I think the biggest risk of using an attorney that you're not familiar with or understand their process is, I'm sorry.
Or have a rapport with.
Or yeah, I mean, you understand that when you have a consistent, like this is my preferred closing attorney, you know the process, right? There's no surprises, you know exactly what you're going to get. And so therefore you're less likely to miss anything because I know, hey, I'm gonna get this. They're gonna tell me do A, B, C, and D, and I go through this, and I'm done with them. I have it in place. Whereas when you have a new attorney, you don't know the process. They're gonna make some assumptions that you do, and they may also treat you as a number versus, or so transactional that you know what, if you there's no flexibility, and we get that a lot where people will complain to say, "Hey, my loan officer had a baby and he was supposed to send something out. He didn't, and now it's going to delay the closing. So instead of having the documents at 12, it'll be closer to 2, but the closing isn't until 4. Can we still make the closing?" The Hawes Law Firm says yes. Some other closing attorneys will say no because they have a very strict, rigid, if it's not in by a certain deadline, too bad, you missed it the next day. That upsets your client. The reason why is because they shouldn't be held liable for, mistakes that are beyond their control. Not only that, most of your clients are probably taking off work to come to closing. They've changed their plans in order to make this time, and then to find out that they've made all these adjustments to say, "Oh, you can't make it. You'll have to do the next day." It's not, comfortable, and it upsets the relationship, right? Because you've built a rapport with your client and they've trusted you. And now it's like, we're getting to the end and now I'm getting all these hiccups. I see a hand up.
Hey, so this may be a two-part question. Do the requirements for closings and things differ from county to county in Georgia, or is it the same? And do you all practice in all counties? So can you do closings all over Atlanta or just in a certain area?
So question one, it does not change it from counties to counties. Everyone basically is the same. The difference really for each county is processing time. So for example, in Fulton County, where of course it's more, I won't even say just Fulton, Cobb, DeKalb, Gwinnett, basically those big hubs, they're moving a lot faster because there are more people. And so it's not as rural. There may be some other counties like, for example, Bartow, or if you go further south, where there is one clerk and one assistant clerk in the whole department, and they're having to take care of all the real estate within their county, then they may be a little slower. Now, that doesn't affect the process for closing. That just usually affects the process for the aftermath. So a lot of times when people are calling you and saying, "I checked the records and it doesn't show I own this home." Yes, you do own the home. It's just, it takes them a minute to put it into the system. So that's usually the only differences that we see. But as far as like title reviews, it's our title company who runs down to wherever we tell them to go to say, "Hey, we need a title from this county." So the time is the same. The only time we ever experience a long title time is when we find out things like, "Hey, I was selling this property and it used to be 3 parcels, but I decided to merge it into one. Now there's 3 different title searches because we got to go back 50 years and it hasn't been 50 years since you've merged those together. Then I got to do a title search for each 3 parcels just to make sure that all 3 are cleared, even though it's now 1. And that's few and far between. That's not common. That's usually, major for if you have investors, because a lot of times they will buy small, like, "Oh, mom and pop had all these parcels and it was 3, but I'm making one big apartment complex. I'm merging it into one." That's usually when that more so hicks up. Also, we've noticed that for duplexes, right? People will say, "Well, it was a duplex, but now I've switched it up and I've made it into one big home." Even though the land is still there because the duplex showed 2 different houses, we got to check those.
Okay.
Go ahead, Marvin. I see your hand is up too.
Yeah,
I love questions, y'all.
yeah. So if you can explain to, because we have a few newer folks here, what exactly is title, so folks
Okay.
understand, and and what do you all do in regards to protecting a buyer based on what the title findings come up with?
Absolutely. So when you are buying a home, there we go. I say that because yes, we are buying a home, but what you're actually also buying and truly buying is the land. And what Georgia and all the states, what we've done is we make sure that you own the title to the land. So that is the actual deed, if you will, saying that this piece of paper note that from this corner lot to this corner lot, whatever that legal description is, the plot is what you own. And so what our job is to do is to make sure that the title is consistent. So that means from the origination as to whomever first bought it, and I say the origination, but really we usually go, the tradition is 50 years. So we go back 50 years. Anything before 50 years is not looked at unless you ask for it. And honestly, it's not common. The reason why is because at that point, it would have changed hands because we don't have a lot of 100-year-old people who've held on to it that much. So usually within a 50-year mark, we can see where the transitions has had. But from the past 50 years forward, we look back to see who that property owned and make sure that the title transferred properly so that it can now go to your new buyer.
And
the
I
way
think
we
that,
do.
oh, go ahead. No. Finish your point. I apologize.
No. And so when we do that, our goal is to make sure there's no change, there's no breaks in that title. So for example, if dad's granddaddy built this house, 50 years ago, and then he gave it to your grandfather and now to your dad, and now it goes to you. What we're doing is making sure that the title shows just that and that there's not a break. Because sometimes, again, when people don't probate estates, they just kind of say, oh, my dad, I'm the only child my dad had, so of course it went to me. That's not recognized without it being probated, which is, a whole nother thing. But so what we do is we check that. We make sure that it shows, hey, from great granddaddy to granddaddy to daddy to you. Yes. And if not, then we come back and say, oh, we got some paperwork to do to make sure we can get it to you.
And I think that this is important, y'all, when you're working with your buyer clients, to strongly encourage them to get something called title insurance, because the lender will get title insurance to protect themselves, but for a buyer, it's optional. So you may run into a situation, especially if it's like a new construction home, where your buyer might feel like, well, it was just dirt here. I shouldn't need to get title insurance. It was just dirt here. But you don't know if the developers bought the dirt from Bubba and them. He has a cousin in Cleveland who has a sister in Tennessee who all have ownership over that land. And unless all of those individuals signed off on that land being sold to the developer, the developer could be passing off a problematic situation off to the builder, who of course sells it to you. So title insurance, and if you can explain, Ms. Matthews, what title insurance protects a person from. I'm kind of talking through it, y'all, but she's going to tell you in more detail why it's important a buyer should have it.
It's so important. And I'm going to give you one even more, like a lot of, you're absolutely right. So one, in short, owner's title insurance is the insurance that you purchase in order to make sure that your title is protected, which means, remember I was telling you that we go back 50 years to make sure that there's no hiccups. Well, there are times where county, like for example, City of Atlanta is notorious for this. And they, of course, provide water, and they title water to the land, not the owner, the land, which means when you are selling property in Fulton County and they have City of Atlanta water, if that person does not pay the bill, it will show up on the title of the property as a lien, right? And so what owner's title insurance does is says that, listen, when the law office does the title search and they say it's clear, if something happens from when you close until now, 2 years, 5 years, it doesn't really matter. And now all of a sudden that title is not clear. It is our job to make sure we clear it for you, free of charge. Why? Because you bought title insurance. So, I mentioned the water bill. We literally had a person just the other day who was closing on the property, had 2 water bills from the prior owner. It wasn't even their water bills, just water bills from the person who they bought from, because they bought the home 3 years ago and the water bill was from back when. The issue is, unfortunately, cities are behind. Sometimes they miss things like this. So they didn't realize that maybe when the title was pulled back then, it didn't show up that they owed the bill. And then it closed. And then later they said, oh, this person hasn't paid. I'm putting a lien in. And so now here it is 3 years later, they're ready to sell the property. And now they got to pay somebody else's water bill. Well, you don't want that. I mean, obviously you didn't buy a house to turn around and pay other people's bills. What that owner's title insurance does is says, you know what? You're right. When we sold you this policy, We said this title was clear. We see a water bill came up and we see it's not yours. Send us the bill. And they paid it. It is the same. I'm pretty sure you have probably seen the news where people will say, my property was stole from under me. Somebody forged my name on a deed. Owner's title insurance even protects you from that. Okay. It's got to be an enhanced policy, which is one thing that the law firm does. We now have made sure that we just start providing enhanced policies because what we've realized is that fraud, unfortunately, is getting out of hand. And there are so many people who are losing their properties off they don't even realize how simple it is to forge a deed and transfer the property. Here's a tidbit for those who are new or even old. Did you know that by law, whatever is presented to that superior court clerk of that county, they must record? What that means is you could bring a paperwork in today that says, from now on, I shall be known as Donald Duck, have it stamped and notarized, and say, I want this recorded, and they got to record it.
Wow.
They do not check it. They do not verify it. They must record whatever is submitted to them, which means if a person pretending to be you decides to forge your signature to say, I'm selling my house to this guy right here, and they have it signed and stamped and notarized, there's nothing they can do but file it. Right. But that's what the owner's title insurance does. They are protecting you from that. So that all you have to do is illustrate, like, this was not me. I don't know these people. I don't know anything that's going on. It's fraud. They're aware of fraud. They get on it. It's like you've hired attorneys to protect your property for as long as you own that property. It does not expire. There's not a limit. That insurance is a one-time payment that buyer buys, and they're protected for the life of it. It is invaluable. And Marvin mentioned it. He's correct. The lender will require you to get a policy. It is not optional for the lender, but the lender's policy will not cover you personally.
Right.
So the reason why is because they don't care about fraud. Because what's going to happen is if they transfer the property, they can still foreclose on it. They don't really care who owns it. If they don't get their money, they can foreclose on it because their security deed still stands in place. They'll pull out their owner title policy, their lender's title policy, and say, hey, I'm protected. Send me my money. And they move on to the next. Meanwhile, your client is out on the streets homeless wondering what happened. It is super important. And there are a lot of people who will tell you, and sometimes some lenders who will tell you, oh, you need to save a couple of $100, drop owner's title insurance. Don't do it.
Absolutely.
It is to your detriment. And I can't tell you how many people have made that error and then it has come back to bite them sooner than later. Water bills, and then even new construction. Marvin had mentioned this. I just want to highlight this because a lot of people don't realize this. New construction is probably the worst time to not have owner's title policy. And here's the reason why. It's not even because of who the builder bought the property from. Sometimes they don't pay their contractors. The contractors now have a right to file a lien on those properties. Those are mechanic liens. Guess what? Mechanic lien stays with the property. So if your client now buys it, they don't care that the roofing company is owed $12,000. They don't own the home anymore. Your client does. And now your client is on the hook for $12,000 because it is their roof. So it is super important to protect them from those things because it is literally insurance. It's like no one goes out to drive and plans to get into a car accident, but you are prepared if you do. There is a hand up. Corey?
Yes. Hello, everyone. My question is more for newer agents out there. So what would you say to newer agents when it comes to should they be at the closing table? Are they required to? And if so, why they should be there at the closing with their client?
Right. So you are not required to be at the closing, but I'm going to tell you, I highly recommend it. And if I'm your broker, I would mandate you to be there. The reason why is because if there are some agents who have actually never owned a property themselves. Like, maybe they inherited their property or their parents gave them. So they own a house, but they didn't have to buy it. There are some people who went and just paid cash for a place and flip, whatever the situation is. There are a lot of times where, if you've never been to a closing and you don't know the experience, it's something to sit back and view. Most importantly, your clients a lot of times need you. I can't tell you how many times the settlement statement has been wrong, right? Because you have a first time home buyer who doesn't really understand what they're looking at. And even when I'm explaining things to them in their mind, they're scared to speak up. They don't know me. They don't have that relationship with me. They have that relationship with you, though. So they're more comfortable in turning to you to say, I don't think this is right instead of me. Sometimes they'll look at the attorneys, they're like, oh no, they're the person of authority. I can't tell them that this isn't right, which I tell them, tell me if it's wrong because I want to make sure we get it corrected. But you're the one they've been working with. They have a relationship. So when you don't come, then it's like they're in it by themselves. And there are a lot of times where people will close and then we'll get a call back and the person says, they were missing a credit and they were scared to say something, and which we will fix after the fact. But it's something that could have been caught at closing if you're there. The Hawes Law Firm is really good about trying to make sure that we always send you that settlement statement in advance. So that way it's not a surprise as far as the numbers. You take a look at it, you can review it with your clients to make sure. But unfortunately, there are times where, like I mentioned the scenario, the lender's like, oh, the closing is 4, we had a glitch. We're not going to be able to get these documents out till 2, but we'll make it for your 4 o'clock closing, which means if we don't get the documents until 2 and we're processing it and sending it out, maybe we're sending that settlement statement to you and you're already driving. So you're not able to just pull over and read the numbers or call your client because you're trying to now get to the closing. So you get there and that's the first time you get a chance to look at it. But they need you. They really do. I honestly, and sometimes it's a preference. You have some clients who has done this rodeo a time or two. You've done your part, right? They don't need you. They were like, I've bought 3 houses now. I'm good. I'll meet you later. We'll pop champagne, etc. But definitely for your first time home buyers, they need you. They need you because this is intimidating for them. And you're the one who has that relationship. So you're the one who can calm them to say, hey, if something is wrong, tell me. I will tell her, we will correct this. We will get this right because for us, it's an experience for everyone, right? It's the reason why when we do closings, we not only have candy, we have champagne, we have wine, we have laughs and we joke. The reason why is because we want you to have a great experience because home buying should be an amazing experience for people, right? But sometimes we don't know what has already transpired. Where it's like, the night before they had an all-out brawl with the sellers, and they're just in here kind of pretend, fake smiling, but they really don't like these. We don't know those things, but you can help mitigate that if you're there.
Hey, if you've made it this far in the video and you are a real estate professional, consider partnering with me here at Real Brokerage. Pay nothing per month, get a fantastic split, and you have the opportunity to build a business through revenue share and stock purchases. Book a call at the link below in today's video, and I'm happy to have a conversation on why I was able to grow my business exponentially by moving my practice to Real Brokerage. All right, back to the video. And I think it's important just because, for one, you want to make sure, because many of us are paid at the closing table, you want to make sure you collect your dinero for all of the hard work that you've done. But it's always just fun to just kind of be a fly on the wall. For me, when I've seen the other agent on the other side, like for me, that's a very important day for myself, but also specifically for my clients. So I'll show up suited and booted, Miss Matthews, and I'll see the other agent in flip-flops and a t-shirt. And I'm like, okay, but I think it drives home the professionalism that not only are you starting this journey with that individual client, but you've gone through the headaches. This is, for lack of a better word, been an experience you both have shared, client and professional, and now you're the one handing them the keys at the finish line and making sure you get your money. So I think that it's incredibly powerful to be there. I normally just show up there, y'all, with my laptop. I might be just clickety-clacking, just looking busy. Because it's really truly nothing that we need to do. Of course, if there's any questions about the actual closing documents, that's what Ms. Matthews and her team goes through. But there have been times where I've been called to be, to a document to get notarized, and I have to be a witness. So we will have our role while we're there, but the attorneys are really the ones that handle everything. And it's just good that they know they have an advocate there in you as the professional. So you absolutely want to make sure you're there on closing day if possible.
Yeah. And let me add this to that as well. Especially for new agents, and I know that was your primary thing, for new agents, I think it's so important because you are currently still kind of cutting your teeth into this real estate thing. And you have started the roller coaster and maybe you're, going up until, and you're getting ready to start hitting the loops, right? I can't tell you how many times we've come to closing and an agent hasn't come and all of a sudden it's their client who didn't clean the house like they were supposed to. So now at closing, we are looking for an amendment to be written and you're not there. So it's a lot harder to get things done. And especially now you're getting called on the phone and you're kind of like in the middle of something else. And it was like, okay, wait, I'll call y'all back. Give me 5 minutes. And so now it's delaying the closing and your client is now getting frustrated because they're, maybe the person on the other side, their agent is there for them. They're able to kind of hash this out. And it feels like, man, I'm being ganged up on this other side and there's no one to support me because the law firm, again, I mentioned that we are here for like relationships. We are here for you as an agent. But when it comes to the transaction, especially when a lender is involved, I can't represent you. I have to represent the lender, which means I have to be that neutral party. So I don't side with the buyer or the seller. I am team lender when it comes to a closing. The only time I can be team buyer is when it's a cash deal, right? And so that's important because I tell people, I can help you out with the amendment. When you draft it, and if you want to say, does this look good? Or if in fact, I prefer it. I tell people all the time, please don't write that amendment in front of me and don't let me see it. Please let me see it. Because I point out what I know I've seen in the past, what hiccups people have, made the mistake of because they were, in the heat of passion. This sounded really good. And then it later comes on to bite them. But if you're there at the closing, you don't have to worry because you're there to combat whether, good, bad, and indifferent. And again, though, still being there for your client because that's what it is at the end of the day. Because if your client is happy, what do they do for you? They tell their friends, right? I love my agent. They come back and they tell other people. And that's what you want, right? You don't want to be a person who it seems like, they here for a check, but they ain't really here for me, right? Because we want to make those lasting impressions.
And I wanted you to, if you can, kind of talk through, Kiersten, how you all calculate taxes and everything that you explained on the settlement sheet. Like, what are some things that we can educate our clients on that they're going to see as part of settlement at closing? What are some things y'all walk through?
I'm so glad you said that. So I'm going to start off with the buyer side, right? When you are working with the buyer, the biggest thing I want to make sure they understand is one, the loan amount I think they get. They have to understand their interest rate because a lot of times they don't pay attention to when it shifts. So when they, of course, first applied, maybe they got a preliminary rate and it didn't lock until they were like closer towards date. They want to make sure that they remember whatever that lock rate is and hold to that. They also need to understand the difference between a monthly principal and interest and the actual monthly payment. That's a big one because we'll get clients or we'll get agents who will tell us, my client said she wants to buy a house and she didn't want her payments to be no more than $3,000. They find them in the home. The monthly principal interest is like $2,800. But then when they add, the escrow amount, it's like $3,800. And they were like, I told you I wanted to be at $3,000. You have to understand that lay people don't know the difference between monthly principal and interest and a monthly payment. So when they're saying, I want to be at $3,000, they mean the whole thing. So then that's when you have to explain to them, hey, most lenders are going to make you escrow, which means I know you went on that calculator and they told you that this is what you qualify for, but they didn't include taxes and insurance. And you got to include taxes and insurance. So, and that's what it is. You guys are, we're battling the Google era, right? Where everyone knows everything because all they do is go and Google it. And then they come back and they tell you you're wrong because Google said this. And it's like, Google didn't tell you wrong. You just misinterpreted. Because Google did tell you qualify for this house, but they didn't tell you this didn't include taxes and insurance. That's one of the bigger things that we see. Also, the difference between closing costs and cash to close. So, I know the norm is we tell people, hey, closing costs is about 3% of whatever the purchase price is, right? but that doesn't mean that will be what you actually bring to closing, because that changes depending on a couple of factors. How much did you put down, right? So, there are VA people can do 100% loans. I think, and they can even do 97%, but it's FHA that can do 95%. The rest of us are doing less, right? 90 and lower. So a lot of people mistake closing costs for what they actually have to bring to closing. Here's the best way I can tell you to combat that. If you go to the Hawes Law Firm, so go to the haweslawfirm.com, top right corner, there is a little button that says Seller Buyer Net Calculator.
Yep, I love that.
Yes, indeed. Click on that net sheet. Don't let them guess. You can put in the information. You can say, hey, you really like this house. This is the one we're going to put the pricing on. Okay, so here's what you said the loan amount was going to be. This is what your lender said the preliminary interest rate was going to be. And then it will spit everything out and it will show them the difference in their cash to close and their closing. And then you can manipulate it. So you can say, oh, the seller is saying that they make, maybe we can get the seller to give us $10,000. Well, if they do that, then you bring less. But you can play with this sheet. You can send it to them, PDF, email it, etc. And it does it for a buyer sheet and a seller sheet. And it already puts our fees into it. The only fees that are not in there are your lenders. But you don't have to worry about that, because usually your buyer would have gotten like a preliminary CD from the lender. You can say, hey, shoot me over that CD, or just shoot them the website and say, from the numbers that they gave you, put that in. You got whatever the law firm has, and you can get an idea as to what your cash to close will be. And that is the money you actually have to wire over. That has been such a game changer, I think, for so many people, because, again, you got first time home buyers and they're looking and everybody's telling them 3%, 3%, 3%. But again, that varies depending on those factors. So important to know. So that's the biggest. And then we talk about taxes. So right now, almost all of the counties' taxes are out. Fulton just came out Monday or Tuesday. So Fulton County taxes are out. Gwinnett Council taxes were already out. I think Cobb has also come out. I have to double check. But basically, right now, taxes are now due, or at least tax bill is out. The due date is really usually not until October, November. But that's a big deal for anybody who's closing soon. Because what that means is before, for example, if your buyer was buying a home in July, they would have gotten credit for whatever the proration of taxes. So that means from January 1st to, let's say, July 10th, from when they bought that home, they would have gotten whatever percentage back from the seller would have credited to the buyer. Now the buyer doesn't get any credit. We just take the money from the buyer and from the seller, because the bill is now due, which means you are now paying money out. So where before you were like, oh, okay, I got time to pay this out because I could have paid my taxes out, for example, in July. Oh, that would have come in my escrow account. No, not anymore. Now it's part of your cash to close. So that's a big deal. So what that means, and for like new people, what I'm saying is there's a difference now from when they buy the house to saying how much you actually have to bring to closing versus you could have saved it because it would have gone into the escrow account and they would have paid later. That's a big deal, right? Especially if you have someone who's buying a higher price property or a property that is not under homestead, in which case taxes are higher. So if you're buying a home and the person never filed homestead, and now this $300,000 home has a $6,000 tax bill, and it's September, yes, the seller will pay starting from January 1st until September, today's the 6th. Okay, so until September 6th. But now your client has to pay from the 6th until December 31st. And that is money they're actually bringing to closing today versus, oh, I just pay a little bit because escrow would take care of it because I'll just pay it as I go.
That reminds me of my real estate license study material, making those calculations to see who pays what, credit, debit, all that. Please don't remind me, Ms. Kiki.
Yes. Listen, it's real because it happens. And I'll tell you what is where it really gets people. People are used to the property tax part of it. Solid waste Solid waste, HOA. It's the same thing. So for HOA, we're doing the exact same thing. If it's, most of the time the HOAs are a lot different because usually HOAs want all their money in by July, unless they're one of those who do like biannually. So they'll do from January to June and then from July to the end of the year. But those prorations will be the same. The difference will be is we still would take that money as of unless most of the time the seller would have already paid it. So then you're basically just crediting the seller back if you're the buyer. So HOAs are a little less shocking, no worries, but solid waste is a big one, especially in the city of South Fulton. So this is a big one. And this is where people are starting to drive everyone up the wall because city of South Fulton did not start their solid waste program January 1, like most people did. They started it in June. So you got a client who is selling their house June 15th. They're only supposed to pay 15 days of solid waste. And now your buyer is paying the rest of it. And you're like, I didn't even own the house that long. The bill is due June 30th and you are paying for the year because you're paying, in advance. So you're paying starting June 1st of 2024 to May 30th, 1st of 2025. So now all of a sudden you're paying a solid waste all up front for a property you didn't really own yet. But it's because their billing is in the middle of the year. So that city is a little funky. We're used to it now. So we've, made sure we adjust it for the clients to have it. But it's one of those math calculations where if you're not paying attention, your buyer could be spending more money than they should or not getting all the credit they should.
And I wanted to know as well, and this is so good. If you guys have questions, throw your hands up here. We got about 10 minutes left, and I want to let you guys go on this Friday. But how long does the closing process take from start to finish the day of? What are, you were going to go into some pitfalls. I really want to hear some like horror stories, to be honest with you. That way we can avoid them. But how long does the actual closing process happen the day of? And what are some, again, horror stories that you've dealt with that folks can learn from?
So the timeline for a closing can depend, right? Like, for example, if it's a cash deal, we can get title back between 3 to 5 days. And on that 5th day, if the title is clear, we can close that day. You can literally send in a contract on Monday and close on that Friday, right? Because it's cash if no lenders involved. When a lender is involved, that's a little different because when your contract comes in, the first thing we have to do is we have to wait for that lender to send a title request, right? Because basically we need permission to even pull that title because the lender is involved. They're the ones footing the bill. So sometimes you have a lender who is like, hey, they sent the contract in. Oh, so this is pro tip. If you are a new agent or an old agent, when you send your contract over to the law firm, if you're not CCing your loan officer, pop your head. CC that loan officer. You need them to know that the contract is in because you want them to have that contact information so they can go ahead and send that title request. Because the faster they send that title request, the faster we can request it and we get it back. Because the reality is, once the title is clear and we have all the payoffs that we need, you can close whenever y'all ready. Right? Now, what does that timeline look like? Title request typically, for the most part, 5 business days. So you send it in on Monday, it's back by Friday. We review it. If it's clear, you'll get an email saying, congratulations, it's clear. If it's not, you'll get an email saying, hey, not clear. Here's what we found. Give us a couple of days. We'll fix it. Usually we can fix it within that following week, right? Because it's not hard. Either somebody wants the money or there is an issue on it, on the title where it's cloudy. And by cloudy, we mean there is a gap or a chain, break in a chain of title, or the person is not the right people. So I can't tell you how many times we get grandmama passed and I'm selling her house. And when they say, who's the seller? You're like, oh, me, I'm the seller. And then we say, oh, wait, the house says Emma Jean George is the owner. You're not Emma Jean George. Who is that? They're like, oh, that's my grandmama. She passed. I'm selling her house. Like, no, dead people don't sell houses. You got to probate that. So it's things like that we may discover, but we can help through that. Overall, let's say for a clean title, In 2 weeks, we would have gotten title requests, title back, sent back to the lender, and payoffs. As long as everyone responds the way they're supposed to respond, 2 weeks, we're waiting for the lender. We can close. We've had people who close within 14 days. And that's, like everything is perfectly aligned, right? Can it be longer? Absolutely. Absolutely. But here's where you as agents can help. Stay on your client. So the law firm will send out an email. We usually CC you to say, hey, buyer, we need your information, or hey, seller, we need your information. When we don't get it, we'll send another message back saying, hey, we're still waiting on it. It's your job to say, hey, I saw the law firm send an email saying they need your information. Did you send it in? Like, don't let them wait, because I get it. They get a lot of emails. And before they know it, they were like, I was so busy at work and I forgot. Make them stay on top of it. And here's how I tell new agents, or really all agents, when you have a person who's going under contract, make the recommendation for them to create a brand new email address solely for this process. The reason why is because now when they get the notifications, every notification they give her that email, they know is related to this transaction. It is not spam. It is not, junk mail. It is for this transaction, because the only people who have it is you guys, the loan officer, and the law firm. So that means every time they get a notification, somebody wants something, which means it's time for you to do something. That trains them to, it's almost like, what is it, the Pavlov? Yeah, it's like Pavlov dog, whatever. But like every time they see that notification, they know action. Because if they put it in their traditional email, you got to fight Macy's and Home Depot and everybody else for email. So, but that's the time frame. And then I'm going to give you a real quick pitfall question if no one else has a question. The biggest pitfalls that we have seen have come from terrible amendments. You have got to be careful how you word the amendment. The reason why is because when we are writing, we write from our knowledge, which is not uncommon. The problem is we have to make sure we write for someone else's understanding, not our own. If you keep that in perspective, your amendments will be good. So here is an example. We had one amendment where it was a new construction. A guy, he bought property, tore it down, built it up, just this one home. But he had not gotten a certificate of occupancy from the city of Atlanta yet. But the buyer wanted to close because his rate was getting ready to expire. So he agreed to say, you know what, I'm going to go ahead and close on this property. And I want this amendment to say that you'll finish all of these, we'll get the COA, the certificate of occupancy by this date. So the way the amendment wrote was, you guys will fix all these things to the buyer's satisfaction. And once you do that, then we will release $250. And you will get the certificate of occupancy by October 15th. And in case that I'll release the other $10,000, and we'll all be happy. So on the surface, that seems right. Here was the funny thing. There was only $10,000 being held. So if you're releasing $2,500 when they fix the repairs, how do you later release $10,000 when they get the certificate of occupancy? I can't. I don't have I only have 10,000. So I can't release $2,500 and 10,000 because that's $1,250, not 10,000. So that was one of their problems. A second problem was they said to the buyer's satisfaction. If I'm a buyer, would I ever be satisfied if that means I could get money? I could get the repairs and money?
That's a good point.
So we never want to leave it to their satisfaction. Also, they made a comment to say that both agents would sign off that, all the repairs were done. Well, guess what? I'm pretty sure that though you may love your clients, there may be some clients that you just didn't mesh well. Like, you're glad that transaction is over, you close the book on that and you move forward. Well, that kind of happened in this situation where that agent was non-responsive. She got her money. She's moved on to the next. So she never would respond when they kept saying, please sign off that this inspection that we got. Please sign off, please sign off. To the point where they had to bring the broker in to say, your client, your agent is non-responsive. And his comment was, This transaction closed 2 months ago.
Hmm.
Why would she still be involved? And then they had to pull up this amendment. It's a terrible idea. It's a terrible idea to ask someone to come back to something that they've done 2 and 3 months ago. Don't put the weight on those people. Make it clear and plain. Repairs must be done, and don't leave it to the buyer's satisfaction. Repairs shall be completed. Receipts can be provided, right? Because most of the time you're going to get this work done. They already have come with warranties. These contractors will warrant their own work. Don't hang yourself up on that. Leave that on them. They're done this. We will provide receipts and warranties of the work that's being performed. That way, if they're not happy with something, they go back to the contractor, not back to you. Don't let them hold your client's money up. Or don't you be held up with trying to get money out of a pot that they're fighting to keep. There was another pitfall that we had, again, an amendment where the person was buying land, and it was clear that the amendment said the seller shall provide a survey of the land, and it should be provided before closing. It was not provided before closing. They did an amendment to say, okay, well, we'll accept it after closing. The survey came, and they said, and if they don't submit the survey within a certain date, then we get $10,000. Okay. Survey was submitted, sent to the buyer. The buyer had a fit. Why? Because he bought this land under the impression that he was buying 2.1 acres, and it was really 1.89 acres. And for him, that was a big deal. So he wanted us to hold that to, no, y'all can't pay him because he violated the amendment. No, he didn't, because the amendment only said he had to submit to you a survey. Didn't say it had to be a survey and showing the full acreage. Just submit a survey. So did he do what he's supposed to do? Absolutely. So,
and I think it's key. I just will say, I think it's important, y'all, that when you are writing these amendments, remember you are not an attorney. So I always run my amendments by the broker team first. Let the broker team tell you, because they're going to be the ones that advocate for us if we need to advocate for our clients. We are not attorneys. We're not JDs. Run it by the broker team. And then once the broker team gives you the correct language, then again, if you have a rapport with the firm here at Hawes, I'm strongly suggesting that you use them. Then they can review it before you send it off to your client to sign, and you know that you've covered yourself, because again, it all comes back to us as the realtors when things go south with our clients. And I have done this for long enough to know that if I can proactively get ahead of something by leaning on the broker team for language, that's exactly what they're there for. They help us with the language. That's going to make you a better professional for your clients.
Absolutely. And go to training classes. That's my last little tidbit. You don't know what you don't know till you know. And a lot of these training classes, some of them are a bore, I admit. But if you can, the law firm, I will gladly come back, do this with a PowerPoint slide, highlight points, the whole nine. I've done ones where we go line by line talking about a settlement statement. We talk about what you should look for, what you shouldn't have, whatever we need. The idea is the more that you know, the more knowledge you have, the less likely you're able to fall in these pit holes, right? And that's what you want, right? Like your client wants that for you too, and you want it for yourself.
I love it. Well, I really appreciate you taking the time, Ms. Matthews, to speak to the group here. Let's give her some digital hand claps. Okay, they're already coming through. I love it. I love it. We truly, truly appreciate you. One last thing that I want to suggest you all to leverage is they have locations all over Atlanta, as Ms. Kiki mentioned. So we can leverage those office spaces if we want to meet with our clients, talk through some of the other ancillary services that you all provide for realtors.
Yes. So one thing was asked beforehand, and I'm going to circle back. Do we close everywhere? We do. We close almost everywhere. So we're not, we're down in Macon. We have a lawyer who assists us for closings like in Macon and Columbus. But definitely, within this Atlanta, Bartow, Kennesaw, Cartersville, yes, we do it, right? And we have either a satellite office that we can use, or we even have our Sprinter van. So we have this Sprinter van that we will drive out and do a closing in a Sprinter van if you must. The idea is we want to make sure that, again, your closings are memorable and accessible, right? You know, people have ability issues. We will make it happen. We have an office in Conyers that if we need to use, because you're going that far out, we'll go that way. Um, again, other ancillary systems, I can't highlight this enough. Make sure that if you need us, talk to us about probate, right? Like, don't chance it. I can't tell you how many times people say, my client is not sure if they own this property because, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Before you let them ring you along to go under contract for something they cannot sell, send us a message. It takes us no time to check to make sure that the person who's saying they're selling this home is fine, can sell this home or buy, buyer is a little different, but those are kind of things that we're here for to help you with, to make sure that you're not wasting your time.
I love it. And do you all work with, a few of us do work with like investors and wholesalers and the double close, all that stuff. I know some firms do them, some don't. Do you all do double closings?
We do not do double closings.
Okay.
We don't do double closings. We are not. So if it's a traditional investor, yeah, we'll work with them, but we do not do double closings. We find it to be more headache than good. I know they love it, but a lot of times it's like the person who's selling it really don't own it. They just it gets convoluted. If you are a newer agent and you're working with investors, I highly recommend a mentor. I would not get into that type of real estate without talking with somebody, watching them go through it, because before you know it, we've had quite a few people who've come back and it's either done wrong or it was done unlawfully, right? So somebody's asking, what is a double closing?
Yeah.
A double closing happens when an investor, for example, like meets a couple and they say, oh, well, I'm not going to really buy your house. I'm going to buy your house, but I'm not. What I'm going to do is I'm going to like fix it up, and then I'm going to get you to sell it to this person. So it goes from you to me and then me to them, all in the same day. The problem that and then there's some other ways people do double closings, but that's how it is in short. There end up being 3 different parties and it's changing hands all in the same day. The problem is if the attorney is not doing it right, or even if they send it in and the county is not careful, they'll record it in the wrong order, and then the wrong person is having the property. It's something that's very tricky, and you have to be very detail oriented for. And some people love it, some people don't. Our law firm, we're so high paced right now. We try to steer away from it because our niche has been really residential. We do commercials, but our niche has really been residential. And when you're good at something, you stick with it.
Yeah, and those of you that work with individuals that call themselves investors, that a lot of times they're wholesalers, as she just mentioned. If they're direct cash buyers, it's a very straightforward process. As she mentioned, title can be done. You can close within the week. But when you're dealing with individuals from the internet or individuals that may send you a text message and say, "Hey, I'm an investor. Can you find me any off-market properties?" More than likely, those are wholesalers. And as she explained, how they try to protect themselves is that they may offer Joe Schmo seller X amount of dollars. The seller will agree to that, but they have no intention of buying it. They take that contract, they sell that contract to the end buyer, who's going to be the investor. But in order to get their money, they close with the seller and then turn around and then close with the investor. And that's what the double closing means. And I steer away from wholesalers, especially in this market where our compensation is not guaranteed any longer from the seller. So if you are one of those individuals that runs across that situation, I can help in that capacity. But 9 times out of 10, the juice is not worth the squeeze in most cases. So does anyone have any other questions for Ms. Kiki? I want to let you guys out of here. We are 6 minutes past the hour. So appreciate you. If you have any questions, please come off of mute. I'll give it a few seconds here. And if not, I'll let you guys go. Anyone have any questions? All right. We got some really good feedback. Everyone said this was gold. Great ideas. And I did drop the NetSheet link in the comments so you guys can save that. Ms. Kiki, what's the best way to get in touch with your office?
Email. You definitely can call us, but email is the best way. And you want to send a message to closings, and that's with an S, CLOSINGS, at the Hawes, HAWES lawfirm.com. Send us a message. Let us know what you need. And sometimes they'll direct you. So something be like, hey, I met with Kiersten. I got a question. The office will call me Kiki. So you do not have to remember Kiersten. They all call me Kiki too. And, I want a question for Kiersten. They'll say, Kiki, this is for you. They'll shoot it over to me. Or if you say, you know what, I'm ready to start doing business, tell them I sent you. They'll take care of you.
Love it. Love it. And I always, when I email them, y'all, as she mentioned, I include 4 people. I include my lender or the seller's lender or the buyer's lender, the law firm, myself, and the listing agent. It's incredibly important that when you have that contract done, ready to go, signed by all parties, include everybody. I always make introductions. I'll say, I'm Marvin, I'm the buyer's agent. This is Sally Sue, she's the listing agent. This is Kiersten, or I know you all have a closing coordinator that you use, as well as the lender. It is incredibly important that all communication happens in that group chain, because as she mentioned, things can get lost in translation and you don't want to do that. So thank you so much, Ms. Kiersten, Ms. Kiki, for being a part of the call. You all enjoy the rest of your afternoon. And if you are not with Real Brokerage, please book a time to chat. Do that in the link in the description below. Would love to talk through value add conversations like we are having today. And you all enjoy the rest of your Friday.